Hey you guys, and welcome to Fire the Spirit YouTube. I'm Cindy, and today I have a book review for you. And this book is Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis. I'm going to give you a little bit of a overview concerning the plot, and I'll tell you about the characters. Now, in the beginning, Ransom is a philologist who is a person who studies language. And he's out by himself, and he comes upon this house. And he goes inside in order to intervene for a young man who is being held against his will. And Ransom instead gets kidnapped by two scientists. One is named Devine and Devine, and one is named Weston. Now, Devine is more interested in what he can get out of the experiments that they're doing, what he can get out of them for himself. And only himself, while Weston is doing these experiments because he wants to preserve the human race. Weston doesn't understand the idea of preservation, because in order to preserve the human race, he will do whatever it takes. He will destroy another civilization in another world, or he will destroy part of the human race and want to reform it. Now, Weston and Devine take Ransom to another planet. When they arrive, Ransom realizes that they're going to hand him over to these aliens. And he's like, oh my goodness, they're going to sacrifice me. So he runs away, and he ends up with the Harrahs, which are a type of alien who resemble humans, but only a little bit in the general physical structure. They're like furry and look a little bit on the outward more like animals. And he lives with those for a while because they're friendly and intelligent, but unfortunately he puts them in danger, and he eventually leaves to go see the Yarsa, which is the guardian of the planet. Now, each planet, according to C.S. Lewis, had its own Yarsa, which was like a guardian angel of the planet, and who was like the overseer for everything, and the person who people would go to for judgments. And so Ransom goes there to be judged. And Weston and Devine are taken there also. And Weston and Devine are judged to be evil men. They are all sent back to Earth, but Ransom is sent with a special mission to really help save the Earth from the Bent One, which is Earth's Yarsa, who is really the devil. So, and that is how the book ends. This is the first in a trilogy, so Ransom's story continues in Paralandra and that great and hideous strength. But Out of the Silent Planet really shows us how Ransom got involved with the interplanetary conversations. So I'm going to give you 5 reasons why you should read Out of the Silent Planet. 1, it's written by a Christian. That is C.S. Lewis, who is one of the best friends of J.R.R. Tolkien. And they both wrote kind of similar books. J.R.R. Tolkien, his Lord of the Rings series, was a little bit more in-depth than C.S. Lewis's Narnia series, but that's not the case for Lewis's science fiction trilogy, which I'd say is totally on the level of Lord of the Rings. And it's a trilogy too, so it definitely rivals it. However, C.S. Lewis turns a corner because he writes it in the science fiction genre, while J.R.R. Tolkien writes Lord of the Rings from a fantasy viewpoint. Number 2, its character development is superb. A lot of authors don't focus so much on the character development and more on the plot. The plot in this book is really awesome, and it's very fast-paced, but the character development is great. And you can tell because the way you see the characters in the beginning of the book versus the way you see them at the end of the book is completely different. And that's how you can tell that an author really has character development down. Number 3, it has Christian values. And a lot of books written for teens today don't use Christian values. They may have a moral here or there, but it's different when a book focuses. 4, the book really helps you to understand the relationship between God and his creation. And it talks about the angels' relationship with men and other creatures in God's creation. And it really, I read this in another book review about how it shows the relationship between God and his creation, and as I'm going back and reading it for a second time, I really am noticing that. And I didn't really think about it that much before. But it definitely is a very interesting take on other like spiritual God's spiritual creation. Number 5, it's a well-written science fiction book. And I mentioned this in number 1, that how J.R. Tolkien wrote fantasy and C.S. Lewis wrote science fiction. I really love science fiction, and I feel like a lot of modern science fiction authors don't do a good job. It's more of like a fantasy and not real science fiction. C.S. Lewis writes it from a scientific viewpoint rather than books which are supposed to be like science fiction but are kind of more futuristic. And this isn't. It was written from C.S. Lewis's time, from his point of view, but it involved things that he used scientific terms that you could understand, and you could say, oh, I wonder if that could really happen. His writing is a lot like Jules Verne, where you could look at that and you could see that happening later. So, and it's really hard to find a good science fiction book out there, and I would really recommend that you read Out of the Silent Planet, as well as the other 2 books, which are Paralandra and That Great and Hideous Strength. So thank you. This has been a Fire of the Spirit YouTube video book review. Woo! Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to our channel, and like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Fire of the Spirit has a website which you can find the link for in the description. Thank you!